The deputy took Rosie Dube by the arm and turned her away from the seep at the foot of the embankment, and the glass jar went out of her hand into the grass, and the lid came off, and the muddy water she had spent 4 minutes collecting ran away into the ground. She was 35, in a faded ball cap, worn backwards, and rubber boots. A stripe of orange clay dried down one thigh, and she did not pull away. Above her, the earth dam rose green and enormous in the last of the sun, and away to the west, a storm front stood up black over the ridge. Deputy Lyle Beaumont had taken one look at a young black woman crouched at the bottom of his county's dam with a jar in her hand, and decided she had no business there. What he did not know was that on the signboard at the crest, bolted there because the state requires it, was the name of the engineer responsible for that structure, and that the water in the jar he had just spilled was the color of tea. Before we find out who the woman in the handcuffs really was, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive back into the story. Rosie Dube washed drill core for a living at 19 years old, which is the least glamorous job in the whole of engineering, and which she describes as the only apprenticeship worth having. A soils lab takes cylinders of earth out of the ground, and somebody has to clean them, log them, weigh them, and put them in trays. That was her for 4 years at $7 an hour while she did an associate degree at night, because there was no money at home, and there never had been. The man who ran that lab was a 60-year-old geotechnical engineer called Emmett Sear, who had spent his career on embankment dams and who talked to the lab girl because the lab girl asked questions. Sear had a rule he said so often that it stopped sounding like advice and started sounding like arithmetic. An earth dam does not break, he said, not first. It goes cloudy first. Everything else, the crack, the slump, the noise, the thing people put in films, all of that is the last 10 minutes. The first 6 months are just a little bit of dirt and some water, coming out somewhere nobody is looking. She got her bachelor's at 24, still working, and her professional engineer's license at 28. And she took a state job at a salary her classmates laughed at, because the state job came with the only thing she actually wanted, which was jurisdiction. At 35, she was one of 4 dam safety engineers covering a state with 1,100 regulated dams in it. That title also sounds like a clipboard. It is not. In that state, a dam safety engineer holds a delegated statutory power. She can issue a written order compelling the owner of any regulated dam to lower the reservoir immediately at whatever rate she specifies. And there is no county official, board, or commissioner with the authority to countermand it. It goes into effect the moment she signs it. 4 people in that state can do that. She is one of them. 2 things she kept from all of it, and both matter this evening. The first is the sign. Every regulated dam in that state carries a board at the crest, the name of the structure, its hazard classification, an emergency number, and the name of the assigned state engineer. 1,100 dams, 4 names between them. Hers is on 270 of those boards, and about 900 people a week walk past one to get to a boat ramp, and none of them read it, because it is a piece of metal on a post. The second is a habit that a county water manager had described 11 weeks earlier in an email he did not expect anybody to read out loud. As a young woman with something to prove, Rosie Dube goes and looks at the toe, not the crest where the road is and where the photographs get taken. The toe, the bottom of the downstream slope, in the long grass, in the willows, where the ground is soft and there is nothing to see and no reason for anybody to walk, because that is where the water comes out. She has explained it to 2 legislative committees in the same sentence, and it has been quoted back at her by 3 different reporters who did not understand it. Everything you need to know about a dam is leaving it at the bottom, in a place with no road to it. She drove out to Caney Fork Dam on a Friday evening in the first week of September, because of a phone call from an operator named Curtis Nallman that morning, which had lasted 4 minutes and had contained one sentence that made her cancel a meeting. Curtis had said, "The seep at the toe has gone off color and I don't like it. The dam is an earth embankment about 110 feet high and 1,100 feet long, built in 1958, holding a reservoir with a boat ramp, a marina, a public swimming beach, and a mile and a half downstream on a flat bench beside the creek, a campground with 140 pitches, and beyond that, a town of about 2,000 people. It was a holiday weekend. The campground was full. She got there at 10 to 8, with the sun going down orange over the water and a storm front standing up black in the west. And she parked at the crest and put her boots on in the back of the truck. She walked it the way she has walked embankments since she was 23, which is not the way an inspector walks a dam. Inspectors walk the crest road with a clipboard. Rosie walked down the downstream face into the long grass. A settlement monument at Station 4 had been clipped off by a mower and was lying in the grass, which means 9 years of movement readings on that part of the crest now have a gap in them that can never be filled. The piezometer well cap at Station 6 was padlocked, and the key was not on the board in the gatehouse, which means nobody had read the water pressure inside that embankment in an unknown number of weeks. The crest road had 2 deep ruts full of standing water, which is how you get water into the top of a dam. And there were willows growing out of the downstream slope, 11 feet tall, 3 of them, because willows grow where it is wet and because willow roots make a path. None of that was a catastrophe. All of it was the ordinary, quiet evidence of a structure being maintained by a county with 1 man and a mower. She wrote all 4 in her field book and kept walking down. At the gatehouse, a very young man in a county polo was writing in a bound weird log, doing it the way you were taught and about 1 person in 6 actually does. Reading the gauge, then writing, rather than the other way round. He looked up and said, "Evening, ma'am," to a stranger in muddy boots, and he said it like he meant it. "Evening," Rosie said. "Busy weekend?" "Full up, ma'am." His shirt said A. Bokeh. He was maybe 21, then, quicker and much quieter, without looking up from the log. "Ma'am, if you've got people camping down at the bench this weekend, maybe put them up on the ridge site instead." Rosie looked at him. "Better views," he said, and smiled, and the smile was completely wrong for the sentence, and a truck went past on the crest and the moment closed. She would think about those 16 words for a long time afterward, not because they were dramatic, but because they were what was left of a young man's courage after somebody had spent 11 days sanding it down. He could not say what he knew, so he said the smallest true thing he could get away with to a stranger, in case it helped. Rosie went down to the toe, and the evening changed inside 4 seconds, and it changed because of a color. Now, before I tell you what she saw, I have to explain the one thing this whole story rests on, and it takes 90 seconds, and it is the single most misunderstood fact about dams in the world. Every earth dam leaks. All of them. Always. A dam made of compacted soil holding back 100 feet of water has water moving through it every second of its life, and it comes out at the bottom, at the toe, in seeps and springs. And that is completely normal, and it is designed for. The question is never whether water is coming out. The question is what color it is. Clear water coming out of the toe of a dam means water is passing through soil and leaving the soil where it is. That dam can do that for 200 years. Cloudy water coming out of the toe of a dam means the water is carrying the dam away with it. It means there is a channel forming inside the embankment, and the water in that channel is moving fast enough to pick up particles, and every particle it removes makes the channel slightly bigger, which makes the water move slightly faster, which lets it carry slightly bigger particles. That process has a name. It is called internal erosion, or piping, and it is what actually kills earth dams, not overtopping, not earthquakes. And its most important property, the one that Emmett Sear made a 19-year-old lab technician repeat back to him, is that it accelerates. It is slow for months, and then it is not slow at all. And there is no reliable warning between those two states except the color of the water. Rosie came through the willows and crouched down beside the seep and put her hand into the pool below it. The water was the color of weak tea. She sat back on her heels for a second. Then she started working, and she worked fast because she could hear thunder in the west. She looked at the grass around the outflow, and there was a rust-orange film on the blades, settled out, the way silt settles when moving water slows down. That is not one day of cloudiness, that is weeks. Then she looked at the point where the water was actually coming up out of the ground, and there was a ring around it, a low circular rim of clean sand, 4 inches across, built up around the outlet like the crater of a tiny volcano. That is called a sand boil, and there is no innocent explanation for one. It is what you get when water traveling through a channel inside an embankment arrives at the surface with enough energy to carry sand grains with it and then drops them as it slows. It is the dam being deposited on the ground in front of you, 1 grain at a time. She unscrewed the lid of a glass jar and filled it from the outflow and screwed the lid back on and wrote the time and the station on the lid in marker, 2011 STA 5+50. Then she took out the weir log photograph she had taken at the gatehouse and looked at the flow figures. The seep had been measured at about 4 gallons a minute 9 days earlier. That evening, it was running close to 12, triple, in 9 days. And then she stood up and walked up the downstream slope to the crest and looked along it in the low orange light and found the last thing. Running along the crest on the same alignment, about 11 feet in from the upstream edge, there was a shallow linear depression in the turf about the width of her hand. It was not a rut. It was a settlement trough, and it had not been on the inspection photographs from the spring, and she had those on her phone and checked them standing there. Rosie Dube stood on top of 110 feet of earth and did the arithmetic that a state pays 4 people to be able to do. Cloudy seepage, a sand boil, triple flow in 9 days, a fresh linear settlement on the crest above it, a reservoir held at full pool for a holiday weekend, a storm forecast for that night, and 140 pitches full of families on a flat bench a mile and a half downstream. She photographed the seep, the orange film on the grass, the sand boil ring with a pen laid beside it for scale, the jar with the time written on the lid held against the outflow, the settlement trough with her boot beside it, and the reservoir at full pool with the storm behind it. She was not being dramatic. She had spent 16 years around structures like that one, and she knew that the hour after you find something like this is the hour in which somebody walks through a seep in boots, and that a sand boil takes about 4 seconds to destroy and cannot be recreated. Then she got out her phone to call the operator, and there was no signal in the willows at the bottom of a 110-foot embankment, and there never has been. So she started walking back up the slope toward the crest, and a spotlight came on above her and found her in the grass with a glass jar in her hand. Deputy Lyle Beaumont was 44, and he had been with that sheriff's office for 19 years. And I want to be accurate about him because the accurate version is worse than the cartoon. He had never in his life said an ugly word about anybody and would have been genuinely and loudly offended to be accused of it. He had grown up 11 miles from that reservoir and had fished it since he was 6. His father had helped build the marina. He had pulled 2 drowned people out of that water in 19 years, and he had done it well, and nobody who was there has ever said otherwise. What Beaumont had was a sorting system, and in a county where everybody knows everybody, it runs on one axis. Is this a face I know? In his head, the world came in 2 kinds, people from around here and people who were not. The call had come in at 7:58 from a man on the boat ramp who had seen somebody down in the willows at the bottom of the dam and had thought it looked odd. That call was not malicious either, and the man who made it has had to live with it. Everything after that was Beaumont. "Ma'am, stop right there. Put the jar down and step away from the structure." Rosie stopped on the slope and set the jar down carefully upright in the grass, which is a detail that came up 11 times later, and stood with her hands away from her body. "My name's Roseanne Dube. I'm the state dam safety engineer for this district, and I need the operator up here right now." "Nice try. This is a critical facility." "I know exactly what it is," she said. 3 things, and then you can do whatever you want with me. "Ma'am, 1, the seep at the toe is running muddy and it's carrying material. There's a sand boil at the outflow with a ring of clean sand around it 4 inches across. Something went across Lyle Beaumont's face. It was fast, and it was not confusion because he did not know what a sand boil was, and a man who does not understand a sentence and has already decided the person saying it does not belong hears it as an excuse being assembled. 2. That seep was 4 gallons a minute 9 days ago, and it's 12 tonight. And there's a fresh settlement trough on the crest on the same line, which was not there in the spring photographs, and I have got the spring photographs on my phone. Put the phone away. 3. Rosie did not raise her voice, and she has a quiet one. The pool is at full. There is a storm coming in over the ridge behind you, and there are 140 pitches full of families on the bench 1.5 miles downstream. So, my third thing is a request. Do not let me go. Call Curtis Nauman, the operator, whose number is on the sign at the crest 20 feet from your truck, and tell him the state engineer is on the tow and wants the gates opened. That's all. Then arrest me. And there is the fork in the road, 4 seconds wide. Beaumont could have made that call. That is all. He did not have to believe her, or understand one word, or let her go. He had to read a phone number off a sign he had parked next to and say one sentence to a man he had known for 30 years. But Beaumont had already decided in his spotlight, and every choice after that was just the bill arriving. He had a stranger at the bottom of a critical structure at dusk with a jar of something in a county that had been told for 4 years to watch for people interfering with infrastructure, and the thing he did next was the thing he had done 1,000 times, which was to take control of the person and sort the story out afterwards. That is a technique. It is taught. It works fine right up until the person in the grass is the only human being present who knows what the color of that water means. So, he did what frightened men do, and here is the part that made it his. "You don't look like any engineer I ever met," he said. He has never denied saying it. It is on his body camera at 20 hours, 17 minutes, and 4 seconds, and it is 9 words long, and it is the reason there was a civil rights complaint on top of everything else. Rosie did not answer it. She has been asked what went through her mind and has given the same answer every time. "I was thinking about the jar." Quick thing before we go on. If you have ever been the person who was right and got treated like the problem for being right, do me a favor and hit like and subscribe, because the next few minutes of this are hard, and I want you here for what comes after them. "There's a card case in my left thigh pocket," Rosie said. "Driver's license, a state professional engineer's license, and a folded blank order form with my signature on it. That's all that's in that pocket. Take it out yourself. And there is a sign on a post 20 feet from your vehicle with my name on it." Beaumont did not take it out himself and did not walk 20 feet. Turn around. And Rosie Dube, who had washed drill core at $7 an hour for 4 years to pay for the license in that pocket, looked once at the little ring of clean sand at the bottom of the slope that would be gone the moment anybody walked through it, and turned around and put her hands behind her back. Because Rosie was not the first person at that dam to say those sentences. She was just the first one the county could not take off a schedule. Amare Boaki was 21, and he had been a reservoir operations technician for 9 months. He had grown up 2 counties over. He was doing a water resources program 2 evenings a week that he was paying for himself. And he had taken the job because it came with a gatehouse, a weir, a set of gauges, and nobody looking over his shoulder, which is either the worst or the best thing that can happen to somebody in their first year. He was good. Technicians are not furniture. They are the people who physically read the instruments, which means the newest person on a dam looks at more actual numbers in a week than everybody above them looks at in a season. 11 days before all of this, Amare had done the weekly seepage measurement at the toe and written down 4.1 gallons per minute. And then he had stood there for a while, because the water had a color to it that he did not remember from the week before. He did what his course had taught him. He filled a sample jar, wrote the date on it, put it on the shelf in the gatehouse, and wrote it up in the county's maintenance system that night. Toe seep at STA 5+50, running turbid, sample retained, recommend engineering review. Nothing happened. 6 days later, he measured it again at 9.4, which is more than double, and he wrote a second one, and he added a line at the bottom that a state investigator would later read out loud twice. The flow has more than doubled in 6 days, and the water is still discolored. That afternoon, Dwayne Prather, the county water resources manager, came out to the gatehouse and found him. And he was extremely pleasant, and he sat on the edge of the desk, so the whole thing looked like a chat. Amare, can I give you some advice? Because you're going to go a long way and I'd hate to watch you make an unforced error. Amare said, okay. It's Labor Day weekend. We have got a marina with 60 slips, a swim beach, a campground, and about 400 boats coming, and every inch we drop that pool is a boat that can't launch, and a business on that shoreline that has a bad year. He said it kindly, and every word of it was true, which is what made it work. That seep has been there since 1958. What you've done is put 2 documents into a county system saying, in effect, that my office is sitting on a dam safety problem going into a holiday weekend. That's not an observation. That's an allegation, and this is a small department, and I sign your evaluations. He let it sit. Nobody's threatening anybody, he said warmly. I'm telling you how a file reads. Amare said quietly that the water was not clear. You looked at a puddle, Prather said. Let the state worry about the state's business. That sentence became famous later, for reasons nobody in that room could have predicted. 4 days after it, the schedule came out and Amare Boki had lost 2 shifts. Not fired, not written up. 2 shifts, which for a 21-year-old paying his own tuition, is about $260 and the entire message. That is what he would say 14 weeks later to a state investigator with a recorder on the table, and it is the most damning sentence in the whole file. He never actually said he'd sink my evaluation. He put my name in the evaluation in the same conversation and let me do the rest myself. And Dwayne Prather had gone through his own version, and it is worth 2 minutes, because Prather was not a monster either. He was 52. He had a county board that had cut his maintenance budget for 6 straight years, a marina lease that paid for a third of his department, and a shoreline full of small businesses that make their entire annual margin over 4 weekends. He also had in a drawer a state inspection report from 2021 recommending a filtered tow drain on that embankment and a quote for it, and no money. He did not falsify anything. What he did was decide alone that a discolored seep could wait until Tuesday. That is what an institutional failure actually looks like. It is never one villain in a room. It is 4 or 5 ordinary people, each with exactly one thing to lose, arranged by 6 years of budget decisions taken by people who will never be named in any report. So when Lyle Beaumont told Rosie Dube to turn around, Amare Boki was standing 11 meters up the slope by the gatehouse with a torch in his hand, watching a stranger get handcuffed for saying out loud the sentences he had been quietly punished for twice in writing. "Deputy!" His voice came out thin, and he pushed it through anyway. "Sir, she's right about the seep. I measured it. It's 12 gallons a minute, and it's been turbid for 11 days. I wrote it up." Beaumont turned his head and looked at him. "Son, go back inside." And Amare Bokia, 21 years old, 9 months in, with a program he was paying for himself, and an evaluation signed by a man who had already taken 2 shifts off him, took a step back toward the gatehouse door, because that is what almost all of us do. And anybody who tells you different has never had a manager sit on the edge of a desk and explain their own evaluation to them. He got 1 step. Then he stopped in the doorway and did not go inside. Rosie saw all of it, over her own shoulder, with her hands going behind her back, and it told her more about that county than the file ever had. People always stop me here and ask it a little angrily, which is fair. Why did she not just say it? She did say it. In the first 11 seconds, standing on a slope with her hands away from her body, "My name is Rosie Dube. I am the state dam safety engineer for this district." Saying it did not work, and there is a reason it did not work that has nothing to do with the words, and everybody watching already knows what it is. So the real question is the second one, which is why a woman with the legal power to empty that reservoir with her own signature let a deputy sheriff put her in handcuffs instead of standing there and insisting. The answer has 3 parts, and she gave all 3 of them to a state hearing 11 weeks later. The first was a ring of sand 4 inches across. That is the whole first part. Everything she had was perishable in a way that people who do not work outdoors find hard to believe. A sand boil is a structure of loose grains sitting on wet ground. One boot through it, and it is gone forever, and it cannot be photographed later or recreated or proved. And it is the single most important physical evidence that internal erosion is occurring, rather than ordinary seepage. Her jar was already spilled. Her phone was in her pocket. If she stood on that slope arguing for 4 more minutes, the most likely outcome was 2 more deputies walking down through the willows to help, straight across the toe, in the dark, in the rain that was starting. What she needed was for nobody at all to walk down that slope for the next 15 minutes, and for a supervisor with a camera to arrive at the crest. Being handcuffed produces exactly that. The deputy walks you up, away from the toe, and calls it in, and a sergeant comes. She has said it in words that got quoted in an engineering journal, which is not a thing that usually happens. I could not protect the evidence by arguing. I could protect it by leaving, and the fastest way to leave with a witness was in handcuffs. The second was the technician in the gatehouse doorway. She did not yet know Amare had written it up twice. She only knew that a 21-year-old had told a stranger to put her family on the ridge site instead of the bench, and had then taken 1 step back toward a door and stopped. She knew that shape. She had been that shape at 20, telling a lab manager that a set of results looked wrong and being told to go and wash cores. And she knew that if this ended with her license and her title, the lesson for every technician on that reservoir would be that telling the truth about water is safe only when the state engineer happens to be standing next to you. That is not a lesson. That is a lottery ticket. And the third part she has only said once to Curtis Nauman in a truck at 4 a.m, and Curtis has repeated it exactly twice because he thinks it is the only part that matters. She was 35 years old, and she had been the assigned engineer on 270 dams for 4 years. And in that time, she had been asked what she was doing there by somebody who worked at the dam 31 times. She had never once made a complaint, and the reason she had never made a complaint was not fear. It was that she had done the arithmetic at 25 and worked out that a woman who complains about being questioned gets a reputation as somebody who is difficult to work with in the field, and that a reputation like that costs you the things she actually cared about, which is being welcome at the toe of a dam at 8 o'clock on a Friday night when an operator is worried. She was 35. She was standing in the middle of the answer. She was going to let it finish and get up that slope. The cuffs went on, and they went on tight. 1 click pass necessary. Out of the small performing competence of a man on a slope in front of a spotlight. Rosie is thin, and her wrists are narrow. 40 minutes later, there would be 2 red bands across them, and a photograph of a 35-year-old engineer's cuffed hands with orange clay still on the fingers would end up in an internal affairs file. And 8 days later, on the front of a state newspaper next to a photograph of a small ring of sand. "You're being detained," Beaumont said. "I understand," Rosie said. And her quiet voice did not change at all, and that is the thing everybody there remembers. It did not change. Then she said the only other thing she said, and she said it clearly, into the middle of his chest where the camera is. And it is the reason there was a state investigation and not a letter. "Deputy, I want it recorded that at 20 hours 11 minutes I sampled a turbid seep at Station 5 plus 50 at this dam, that there is an active sand boil at the outflow, that the seepage flow has tripled in 9 days, that there is a new settlement trough on the crest above it, that the pool is at full with a storm forecast, and that there is a full campground a mile and a half downstream. I asked you to call the operator, and you declined. Time is 20 hours 19. The technician in that doorway is a witness. His name is Amare Bokia. Naming him out loud was deliberate, for the same reason it always is. After that, nothing could happen to him quietly. He walked her up the slope and along the crest to the patrol truck. She was not dragged. Nobody hit her. It took 2 minutes, uphill, in boots. And by then, there were people. 4 men off the boat ramp, a family walking a dog, 2 teenagers on the guard rail, and every one of them stopped and watched, and one of them filmed on a phone and then put it away again because he felt bad about it. And they walked her past the signboard at the crest, a green metal sign on 2 posts, with the name of the structure, its hazard classification, an emergency telephone number, and, on the last line, in white letters, the name of the assigned state engineer. Not one person in that procession read a single word of it. Amare Boki had not gone back inside. He came out of the gatehouse door with his heart going like a bird in a box, and he thought about a manager on the edge of a desk explaining his evaluation to him, and about 2 shifts, and about a jar on a shelf with a date on it, and then he took his phone out and turned it sideways and pressed record. His hands shook so badly that the first 4 seconds are unusable. He got the rest. He got the cuffs. He got her being walked past the sign. And then he did the thing that a state investigator later called the single most important act by any individual in the entire matter. He did not follow them. He went down the slope in the last of the light, alone, and stood 11 feet back from the seep so that he would not disturb it, and held the camera steady for 41 seconds. The tea-colored water, the orange film on the grass, and the little ring of clean sand around the outflow, with the timestamp running at 20 hours 22 in the first rain. Nobody walked through that boil that night. It is in the final report as a photograph, and the caption under it says that it was recorded by a county operations technician. As they came past the gatehouse, Rosie turned her head, found him, looked straight into that camera for about a second, and gave him one small nod. Amare said later that he did not know what it meant. He only knew it meant keep going. So, he kept going. Hey, real quick, if you have ever stood there with your phone out, doing the math on whether the truth is worth the evaluation that decides your next year, tell me in the comments, because I would genuinely like to know how that went for you. And if you want to see what happens next, hit like and subscribe, because the next 4 minutes are the reason I wanted to tell you this one. Because at that exact moment, a torch came down the crest road from the gatehouse at the far end, moving fast. Curtis Nauman had operated that dam for 27 years. He was 61, wiry, sunburnt to the collar, and he had been at the gate valves at the far end of the crest since 7:30, because he had told a state engineer that morning that he did not like the color of the seep, and he had wanted to be standing there when she arrived. When he saw a spotlight and a patrol truck down at Station 5, he assumed there had been an accident on the ramp. Then he got close enough to see who was in handcuffs. Hey! It came out of a 61-year-old man across 200 feet of Crest Road, and it went out over the water the way sound does at dusk over a reservoir, which is to say for about a mile. Get those off her. Lyle, get those off her right now. Curtis, stay out of it. Do you know who that is? He came up the road at a fast walk with his torch swinging. That is Rosie Dube. That is the state dam safety engineer for this whole district. Lyle, her name is on the sign, on the post you park next to. Go and shine your light on it. Everybody looked at the sign. The second unit had come up the county road 90 seconds behind, because a call goes out automatically when somebody is restrained, which is the entire reason Rosie had let it happen. Sergeant Ivy Martis was 50 and had 23 years in, and she had parked at the end of the crest and walked because 23 years teaches you to arrive slowly and look at the ground on your way in. She had come past the signboard, and she had done the one thing nobody else at that dam had done all evening. She had stopped and read it. Then she picked the glass jar up out of the grass and found the leather card case where it had slid on the wet stone at the head of the slope and came over. Beaumont, she said, come here a minute. She did not make a speech. She opened the case and turned it so only he could see and moved her thumb down it. A driver's license. A state professional engineer's license with a photograph and a number. and behind them, folded twice, a printed state order form with a signature block on it and a name signed in ink. Then Sergeant Mardis walked 20 feet back to the signboard, put her torch on it, and read the last line out loud, slowly, so that her own body camera would get every syllable, the title, and the name. Then she came back and held the license up beside her own torch beam, so both names were in shot at once. "Same name," she said. "Take them off." The cuffs came off on the crest of Caney Fork Dam at 29 minutes past 8 in the evening, in the first proper rain, in front of an operator, a technician, 4 men from the boat ramp, and a family with a dog. Rosie brought her hands round in front of her and turned them over, and there were 2 red bands across her narrow wrists, with orange clay still under the nails. Curtis Nauman took his cap off, which nobody who knows him has ever seen him do outdoors, and did not seem to know why he had done it. "Ma'am," Marty said, "my camera's running, and I want this in the file. I'm sorry. This was handled wrong from the first minute, and I'm going to document it that way." "Thank you, Sergeant." Rosie flexed her fingers twice. Then she did not look at her. She looked at the operator. "Curtis, open the low-level outlet, wide. Now, before anything else, and we will do the paperwork behind it." Curtis Nauman was already running, which at 61 is a thing to see. Then she took a folded form out of the card case in the sergeant's hand, and wrote on the hood of the patrol truck in the rain, and signed it, and photographed it, and handed a copy to the sergeant. "That is a state order to lower this reservoir. It takes effect the second I sign it, and there is nobody in this county who can countermand it, including the board, including the manager, and including you." She said that last part without any edge at all, and everybody there has commented on it. "Sergeant, I need 3 more things, and I need you to say the first one out loud on your camera, because I am a woman who was in handcuffs 90 seconds ago, and nobody here is going to move fast for me. Nobody walks down that slope below Station 5. Nobody. There is a sand boil at the toe, and it is the only physical evidence that exists, and a boot will destroy it in 1 step. Second, get me the county emergency manager on the phone, because that campground on the bench is going to be evacuated tonight, and I would rather do it at 9 o'clock than at 3 in the morning. Third, keep that young man in the gatehouse exactly where he is, because he has been filming, and I want his phone treated as evidence, with his consent, and I want that on your camera too." Marty said all 3 out loud. Then Rosie turned around. Deputy Lyle Beaumont was standing very still with the rain starting on his hat. He had aged about 10 years and 3 minutes, and he was already, visibly, assembling a sentence. "Ma'am, Miss Dube, I want to say I had no idea who you—" "Not yet," Rosie said. She was already walking toward the gatehouse with the order in her hand, and everybody on that crest, including 2 deputies and an operator, found themselves following her. There are 140 pitches full of families a mile and a half that way, and it is going to rain all night. We are going to deal with them first. Then we will deal with this. The campground was evacuated between 10 at night and midnight. 140 pitches, about 400 people, in the rain, on a holiday weekend, and the sheriff's office did it door to door, and did it well. And Rosie Dube has said in public more than once that the same department that got the first 11 minutes catastrophically wrong got the next 4 hours completely right, and that both of those facts belong in the same paragraph. The low-level outlet ran all night. The pool came down 2.4 meters in 11 hours. The storm gave 90 millimeters. Then Rosie did the thing that finished it. And she did it standing at the toe at 7 in the morning in wet clothes, without raising her voice once. She walked everybody down. The sergeant, the deputy, the operator, the technician, the county manager who had arrived at midnight, and the independent engineer the state had sent overnight. She stopped them 11 feet back from the seep and made them stand on the flagged path she had put in with survey tape at 2 in the morning. "Nobody goes past this line. I will show you why." She crouched and pointed at the outflow. "Look at the color. That is the whole thing. Not the flow, the color. Every earth dam on this planet leaks, and that is fine, and it is designed for. Clear water means the water is going through the soil and leaving the soil where it is. That dam can do that for 2 centuries. She let that sit. Cloudy water means the water is taking the dam with it. There is a channel forming inside that embankment, and every grain it removes makes the channel bigger, which makes the water faster, which lets it take bigger grains. It is slow for months, and then it is not slow at all. Then she pointed at the little rim of pale sand around the outflow, and the county manager crouched down without being asked. And that ring is 4 inches across, and it is made of clean sand, and clean sand does not grow out of the ground. That is the inside of this dam, being deposited on the outside of it, 1 grain at a time, in front of us. That is not a sign that there might be a problem. That is the problem, arriving in installments. She stood up. 9 days ago, that seep was 4 gallons a minute. Last night it was 12. That is the acceleration. And the acceleration is the only warning anybody ever gets. Nobody said anything at all. The creek ran. Then she turned to Dwayne Prather and did not raise her voice. You had a technician tell you in writing, twice, in 11 days, that this was turbid and that the flow had doubled. You had a 2021 state report in a drawer recommending a filtered tow drain on this embankment, with a quote attached, and no money because your board has cut your maintenance budget 6 years running. Both of those things are true, and I'm going to put them both in the report. And the second one is going to be very uncomfortable for people who have never stood here. Prather did not say anything. And it does not make this all right, because there is a phone number on that sign at the crest, and it rings on my desk, and you have had it for 4 years, and you have never once used it. You made a decision on your own about a discolored seep going into a holiday weekend, and the reason you could make it on your own is that you never told the one person whose job it is to take that decision away from you. Then she turned to Beaumont, and this is the part that got put into a training file. And you did not need to know what a sand boil is. You did not need to believe one word I said or let go of my arm. There is a green sign 20 feet from where you parked, with a phone number on it and a name on it. And there was an operator 800 feet away who has known you for 30 years. Your sergeant walked past that sign and read it, in the dark, in the rain, in about 11 seconds. And she does not know what a sand boil is either. Beaumont said quietly that he was sorry. I believe you, Rosie said, and I'm going to tell you the useful thing and then stop. It is not that you were wrong about me. You will be wrong about people for the rest of your career. Everybody is. It is that everything you needed was already written down within 20 feet of your truck, and you did not go and look. And the reason you did not go and look is that you had already decided. 9 words at 8:17 tell me what you had decided. And then she turned away from him, and that was the last thing she said to him, and it was not about him at all. Boki! Amare came down the flagged path with his phone in his hand and the face of a young man waiting to lose a job. You wrote it up, Rosie said. 11 days ago, toe seep turbid, sample retained, recommend engineering review. That is the correct wording, the correct action, and the correct recommendation. And there are people 20 years into this field who would not have written it that cleanly. Nobody read them, ma'am. They are going to be read out loud by a state investigator, and then by a lawyer, and then by me in a committee room with your name on them. She put out a clay-stained hand, and he shook it. And you kept the jar on a shelf with a date on it for 11 days. Do you understand what that jar is now? That is a sample of what this dam was losing on the 28th of August, and there is not another one in the world, and this morning it is the most valuable object in this county. Then she looked at the reservoir, 2.5 meters down and still falling, and at the flat brown creek, and at 8 people standing on a taped path in the wet grass. Right, she said. Nita, I want a phased drawdown plan on my phone by noon, and I do not care what it costs the marina. Curtis, 24-hour watch on this tow, 2 hourly readings, flow and turbidity written by hand, and somebody drive down to that campground and talk to the 400 people who slept in a school gym last night, because they are owed an explanation and they are going to get it from us and not from a rumor. They found it in November, when the pool was low enough to expose the upstream face. The 1958 construction drawings show a cast iron outlet conduit running through the base of the embankment. Where a pipe passes through an earth dam, the contact between the pipe and the soil is the classic path for internal erosion, and it has been the classic path for 150 years, and every engineer alive knows it. The investigation found a joint in that conduit that had opened by about 11 millimeters, and a void above and alongside it that had been washing out, and a channel running back into the embankment for a distance that the report describes as at least 9 meters. Nita Farrell's independent report is 111 pages, and it is careful because good engineering reports never say anything dramatic. The sentence people quote is on page 7. At the observed rate of progression, and with the reservoir held at full pool through a rainfall event of the magnitude recorded, the development of a breach within days to weeks could not have been excluded. Could not have been excluded. That is as close as a professional engineer will ever come to saying that 140 pitches full of families were sleeping on a flat bench below a dam that was quietly taking itself apart. The repair took 4 months. A filtered tow drain, a grout curtain, and the abandonment and infilling of the old conduit. It cost about $4.1 million. The 2021 report that recommended a filtered tow drain and that sat in a drawer with a quote attached, had been costed at $380,000. The state's order after that inspection changed one rule for every regulated dam in that state, and it is one sentence long. Seepage turbidity observations are a mandatory recorded parameter, and a report of turbid seepage may not be closed, downgraded, or delayed by the dam owner without written engineering review. 2 neighboring states have since adopted the same wording. Dwayne Prather is no longer a county water resources manager. He gave evidence, all of it, and produced the 2021 report and his own 6 years of budget requests. And Rosie said at the hearing, unprompted, that a man who was given 1,100 acres of shoreline economy and no maintenance money has been handed a decision that no individual should be making alone on a Thursday afternoon. Deputy Lyle Beaumont was placed on administrative duty pending an internal affairs review, and there was a separate civil rights complaint about 9 words at 20 hours 17. He is not a deputy anymore, and that outcome was driven by the 9 words and by what a review found when somebody finally read 19 years of stops end to end rather than one at a time. Rosie's letter to that sheriff's office did not ask for anybody to be dismissed. It asked one question: what is the written procedure in this office when a person detained at a critical structure states their name, their office, and the location of a sign bearing both? And why did that procedure not operate here? There was no procedure. There is one now, and it is a laminated card in every patrol vehicle in that county, and its second line is, at a dam, a bridge, or a substation. Read the sign before you decide. Amare Booki is a state dam safety inspector. The state paid for the rest of his program and hired him 11 months later, and he covers 91 structures. The first thing he does at any dam, in front of anybody, is walk down to the toe and look at the color of the water before he opens a single file, which takes 20 minutes longer than everybody else's inspection, and which nobody is ever going to stop him doing. His 2 reports printed out and a photograph of a glass jar on a shelf with a date written on the lid are pinned above his desk in the regional office. Somebody put them there as a joke. Nobody has taken them down. And there was one more thing, and Rosie did it herself in the spring. A month before all of this, Deputy Beaumont had moved an elderly black woman off the public fishing pier on that reservoir as somebody without a permit in front of a dozen people, and there is no permit, and there never has been. Her name was Mabel Twine. She was 72, and she had fished off that pier since 1974, and she had not been back. The old pier was demolished during the drawdown. When the new one opened, Rosie spent 4 months being extremely unpleasant to a county board about a $140 sign and lost, and then paid for it herself, and it is screwed to the handrail at the near end, and it says the pier is named for Mabel Twine, who fished here for 50 years. So here's the honest part, and it is uncomfortable, and I am not going to dress it up. Rosie Dube was saved by 4 coincidences. She happened to be the assigned engineer. She happened to be carrying her license and a blank order form in a thigh pocket. She happened to have a 21-year-old technician brave enough to press record and clever enough to film the boil instead of the arrest, and to have kept a jar on a shelf for 11 days. And a 61-year-old operator happened to be standing at the far gates at dusk because he had made a phone call that morning and wanted to be there when somebody came. And 400 people in a campground were saved by all 4 of those, and by a woman deciding that the fastest way to protect 4 inches of sand was to leave the slope in handcuffs. Take away any one of them, and there is no video, no jar, no sample, no order, no drawdown. There is a young woman detained at a dam, released with an apology nobody wrote down, a boil trodden flat by 3 men in boots before 9 o'clock, a full pool through 90 millimeters of rain, and then either nothing happens, which is what usually happens, or something does. Most people who get looked at the way Rosie got looked at that evening do not have their name on the sign at the crest. Nobody comes down a dam road with a torch shouting it. They go up the slope in cuffs, and the water keeps coming out of the ground the color of tea, and nothing about it is ever written down anywhere at all, and the 2 failures at that dam were the same failure. Nobody looked. A county manager decided a discolored seep could wait until Tuesday. A deputy did not walk 20 feet to a sign. 2 written reports from a 21-year-old went into a system nobody read. A monument got mown off, and a piezometer got padlocked with the key lost. Every one of them read a label instead, because a label is faster, and it is free, and it feels exactly like knowing. Emmett Sear told me at 19 that a dam does not break first. It goes cloudy first, and that everything people put in films is the last 10 minutes. I have had 16 years to think about that, and here is where I have got to. It is the truest thing anybody ever said to me, and it is not only about dams. Nothing that matters fails all at once. Institutions go cloudy for months. So do departments and marriages and towns. The particles come out somewhere at the bottom, in the long grass, where there is no road and no reason for anybody to walk. And the only question that has ever mattered is whether somebody is willing to go down there and look at the color of the water. And whether, when they come back up and tell you, you look at what they are holding, or at who is holding it. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever been the one who saw it first and got told to go back inside? Have you ever been a mare, standing in a doorway with your phone, doing the math on the evaluation that decides your next year? And be honest with yourself for a second. Because I am being honest with myself. Have you ever had somebody hold up a jar in front of you and looked only at their hands? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and this one I really do want to hear. If this story meant something to you, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because this is what I do here every week. Ordinary people, written off in a few seconds, and what happens when somebody finally looks. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next one.